So here's a graph of my own study comparing MAP actors and non-actors on permissive cognitions. This is asking whether it has a negative impact on a child. It's a 1 to 7 scale. 7 is completely negative, 1 is completely positive. And they're in the middle. You know, the actors have a more negative response than the non-actors, but they're in the middle. This question is having sex with children is immoral, not just illegal. Again, actors are more negative than non-actors. I mean, non-actors are higher than actors, but they're both in the middle, and social desirability is higher with the non-actors. So that wipes out the difference between them. So let me give you some example of how our subjects talked about this. Some subjects had a very definite negative view of adult-child sexual activity, but that was only 12% of the people who filled out comments, not the entire sample, but the ones who provided comments. So here are some examples. I'm very aware that adult sexual contact with children is uniformly bad for the child. Psychological effects for life. It can be world-wrecking for children. But this is a more common response. The qualified responses were 58%, and basically it depends is the answer. It depends on the person and the specifics of the sexual activity. If the adult is respectful of the child's wishes and mindful of the child's pleasure, I think it's entirely possible, if not probable, that the child will view the activity as a good experience. The type of contact is really important. Penetration is harmful. And some, okay, so here's fully positive attitudes. And this was a minority of the responses, but they were there. And that is that the harm is caused by the secrecy, shame, and stigma society imposes on children as they grow into adults. And my belief is that the only way this type of sexual relationship harms children is by the extreme social stigma related to children and sex, and by acts of sex that involve coercion. Some people felt the relationships can be loving for the child and the adult. If said adult is empathetic, nurturing, and helpful without taking advantage or seeking gratification, it could have a healthy and positive impact. What are the clinical implications? Well, so we have to recognize that permissive attitudes are common, even among non-actors. And for me, the major issue of contention is children's capacity to consent. And many MAPs will argue that child sexual abuse is not uniformly harmful to the child if the child consents. And the truth is, whether we like it or not, we can't argue that it is uniformly harmful, because not all victims will report harm or psychopathology. And I've had a number of adult patients who disclose their own experience of sexual activity with an adult as a child, and who say they did not experience it as harmful. They were maybe, you know, wanting attention, wanting affection, and they appreciated that. They were often neglected. But what we can argue, what the data is incontrovertible about, is that the risk of harm is great, and the children are not competent to make a decision to take on that risk. The other thing is, if the person is not at risk of acting on their attractions, and there are no children at risk, it may not be necessary to reach agreement, particularly early in the treatment. But it's absolutely important for clinicians to understand the function and the mechanism of permissive attitudes. So what should treatment aim to do? One, we have to recognize the great heterogeneity among MAPs, and that feelings are not equal to action. We do not aim to change sexual orientation. There used to be sexual aversion therapies. There were attempts to change their sexual orientation, and that just does not work, and it further stigmatizes and traumatizes the MAP client. So our goal would be to help patients learn to live in society with their sexual orientation, to accept the reality that they cannot have full expression of their sexual desires, that doing so is illegal and will land them in the criminal justice system, and that doing so harms children. And this may take some time, but they will understand they can't do it because they'll get in trouble. So you want to promote self-acceptance and healthy self-esteem while still accepting the reality of the situation. And you want to empathize and support with them regarding the stigma and the terrible psychological burden that they carry. Now, of course, protection of children and the public is a top priority, but it's not a danger with all MAPs, and it should never preclude empathy.